2,500 years old. It's always been between the classical culture, the Socratic and Platonic culture on one hand, and Aristotle and his degenerates on the other hand, who believe that a very small portion of the population, are born to be leaders, and the rest of us are born to be slaves.
One of the players in your book, Shadow Masters, is a fellow by the name of Victor Bout, a Russian arms dealer. Tell me about him.
This is, again, another amazing story. When the United States government, again, I've been told this by very, very good sources and very good friends in the American government. Now, when the CIA, when they put their, what-if scenarios, in their planning sessions, when they were actually working on the Booth story, the last thing that had occurred to them, that me, Daniel Estulin, the man who has for years have been pursuing, secret government, private secret societies such as the Bilderberg Trilateral Commission, spending years investigating, the roots of the Bilderbergers going back to the Middle Ages. The last thing that they had thought that would actually get on the plane one good day, go to Bangkok and spend 6 months of my life finishing my book, The Shadow Masters, actually working on the Victor Booth story. This is exactly what I had done because it was a key element, the missing link to actually show how Bilderbergers, through these Shadow Masters, are working to control the world. Now, Victor Booth's story, we all heard, I'm sure you've seen the film, The Lord of War with Nicolas Cage.
Right.
Have you not?
Right. Good movie.
Well, exactly. Now, Victor Booth is the poster boy for a new generation of the post-Cold War international arms dealers, we're told, who play a critical role in areas where the weapons trade has been embargoed by the United Nations. But again, I can tell you from my years in Africa, it is simply not true. Victor Booth was selling arms, yes. He was selling ostriches, ostrich eggs, elephants. An arms trade is not illegal. I'm not defending the guy because we are certainly not friends. But, we've been told that Victor Booth, more than most, has succeeded in exploiting the anarchy of globalization, making possible massacres on a scale that has stunned the world. And the Victor Booth story actually begins back in 1991 when the Soviet Union fell apart. Victor Booth was working as a translator in Mozambique in the Russian embassy there. Instead of going back to Russia, he just stayed in Africa. And because he was always into transporting and he loved airplanes, he and his brother Sergei, they bought a couple of old Antonov 24s, which is, you could buy one, the secondhand for about $250,000, which is, a price of a, mid-range Mercedes, which is really not a lot of money. And they basically started moving things from point A to point B. Big gladiolas, which were, buying for $1 in South Africa and selling for $100 a piece in Dubai, to ostriches, to anything that they could actually get their hands on, anything that their clients wanted, they were moving. Now, also about 1993, 1994, 1995, the entire continent of Africa was ablaze in regional and local conflicts. Out of the 53 countries, 32 were at war. So all these Western companies, such as, the American Airlines, the British Airlines, they all pulled out, obviously, fearing for the lives, for the safety of their crews, and for their airplanes. So the entire black continent was left to their devices. So these people, 1 billion people in Africa, were suddenly stranded. They had no access to medicine. They had no access to clothes. They had no access to anything at all until this Victor Booth character, and his kamikaze pilot, who lost their jobs when the Soviet Union fell apart, they stepped in. And for actually, a very reasonable rate, they actually started moving, medicine, clothes, food to people all over the continent. And by about 1996, Victor Booth came to control 90% of African continent. It's just a mega monopoly. Not even Bill Gates and Microsoft ever had a mega monopoly of this size. And when the war started to subside towards the end of 1996, and all these Western corporations and governments wanted to come back, they suddenly found themselves in a situation where this one, pickling Ruski by the name of Victor Booth controlled the entire continent. And keeping in mind that Africa is the breadbasket of the entire planet. Sure. It's full of natural resources, coltan, gold, diamonds, oil, natural gas.
Well, now, he also supplied arms to the Taliban, anybody who would buy them, didn't he?
Well, actually, no, that's not true. And in my book, The Shadow Masters, I basically, explode the myth that Victor Boot has ever worked with the Taliban. Well, the whole story with Boot is that the American government, working, hand in glove with some very unscrupulous United Nations inspectors, and a very important American journalist by the name of Douglas Fair, and not to mention the DEA, and other international agencies such as Interpol, have actually put together this mega conspiracy to ensnare the guy. For what reason? There are actually several reasons.
Has he been?
One,
He's been indicted though, Daniel, hasn't he?
He's been indicted, but he actually won the case in Brussels, and he just won the case. He's in prison in Thailand. He was arrested in March 2008, and he won the court case against the United States government, who actually showed up in court with no evidence at all. The whole thing about Victor Boot is they needed to get him out of Africa because you can't start wars, you can't get at natural resources, you can't get your, NGOs, non-governmental organizations on the ground unless you can actually control the territory. And Victor Boot controlled the entire continent, so they created this amazing diversion. But when he was arrested in Bangkok, and again, I spent the last year living in Bangkok. I just came back to Spain a couple of months ago. I can tell that, when he was arrested in March 2008 with this co-conspirator Andrew Smolian, he was guarded by 20. This is kinds of things that never come out on the American press. He was guarded by 20 commandos, he and Smolian. Next thing we know, Smolian, who is his co-conspirator, one day later finds himself in the United States. Now, we've been told that he escaped, and he was luckily caught by the United States government. Now, this is a man who was, he was handcuffed and guarded by 20 commandos plus DEA in a lockdown hotel. This is a conspiracy. A lockdown hotel in the center of Bangkok, and I got the photographs in my book. The entire hotel perimeter was guarded by 200 Special Forces troops because, again, think of Victor Boot, as an Osama bin Laden because, Osama bin Laden has disappeared unless we believe that, the bad actor who shows up once in a while on television is Osama bin Laden. So Victor Boot has become the number one, terrorist on America's list. So this is the guy, Andrew Smolian. So the hotel is locked down. Just think of a 5-star luxury hotel. You have 200 Special Forces troops guarding the hotel with tanks and dogs. Every stairwell, is guarded by Special Forces troops. Smolian and Boot are each guarded by 20 commandos each, and all these photographs are in my book. They're handcuffed, needless to say. Their passports are taken away, and the American government wants us to believe that Smolian, short, fat guy, somehow escapes, slips his guard without anybody noticing, makes his way out of a lockdown hotel, flags a taxi, handcuffed, goes to the airport without a taxi driver noticing that this guy is handcuffed, and buys a ticket without a passport, handcuffed to the only place in the world that, if convicted, is destined to spend 300 years in a slammer. When I called the DEA agent in charge in Washington, I asked him this. He said, "Yep, this is the official version." I said to him, "And you call me a conspiracy theorist?"
Jeez. Well, Daniel, let me tell you that is he as arms-worthy as Adnan Khashoggi was for Saudi Arabia?
No, not at all. Victor Boot is a patsy. I mean, he's small fry. But he just happened to have been in Africa at the worst possible time when America needed the natural resources. They needed gold, they needed diamonds, they needed control of the entire territory, they needed to get out of the oil in Sudan. And as I said to you before, they were in Congo working with the terrorists of Hezbollah, working on the diamond trade.
Hey,
you
Daniel,
can't have a big booth there.
We're going to take this quick break and come back and take phone calls with you on Coast to Coast AM.